In the heart of Mexico, during a time of change and conflict, a story forever marked the faith of millions. It is the story of a simple man, a humble indigenous person, who would become the bearer of a heavenly message capable of transforming not only his life, but that of an entire continent. How did an ordinary man become the protagonist of one of the greatest miracles in history? Prepare yourself to dive into the extraordinary tale of Saint Juan Diego, the messenger of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the dawn of a new era in Mexico. In 1521, the great Tenochtitlan fell under the weight of the Spanish conquerors. With the conquest came a clash of cultures that profoundly transformed Mexico's social, political, and spiritual landscape. The ancient temples were torn down, and in their place rose Christian churches as symbols of the dominance of the new faith. Yet the soul of the indigenous people still bore the wounds of this abrupt change. Catholicism was spreading rapidly, but many indigenous people adopted it more out of obligation than conviction. Franciscan missionaries worked tirelessly to evangelize, but the hearts of the people remained divided between their ancestral beliefs and the teachings of the new religion. Syncretism began to emerge as ancient deities were slowly replaced by Christian saints and figures. In this environment of uncertainty, the people sought a sign, something that could unite their divided faith and restore their hope. The hill of Tepeyac, a sacred place since pre-Hispanic times, would become the setting for a miracle that marked a turning point in Mexico's history. There, the celestial would meet the earthly in a way no one could have anticipated. The political context was also complicated. The indigenous people lived under an oppressive system of encomiendas, working for the conquerors in exploitative conditions. In their hearts, they needed a symbol to reaffirm their identity and restore the dignity the conquest had taken from them. Without knowing it, a humble farmer would be chosen to bring them that symbol. The dawn of a new era was approaching. It would not be the work of powerful conquerors or influential clerics, but of an ordinary man, a man whose simple faith would unlock the doors to a miracle that would change the history of an entire nation. Who was Juan Diego before becoming a saint? Before becoming Saint Juan Diego, this simple man was known as Cuauhtlatoatzin, a Nahuatl name meaning the eagle that speaks. He was born in 1474 into a Chichimeca family in a small village called Cuautitlan, near what is now Mexico City. His childhood was marked by a deep connection to nature and the traditions of his people. Like many indigenous people of his time, Cuauhtlatoatzin grew up surrounded by the beliefs and rituals of his culture, but his life would take an unexpected turn with the arrival of the conquerors and the introduction of Christianity. Alongside his wife, Maria Lucia, he was baptized by Franciscan missionaries, adopting a new faith that changed his worldview. Despite his conversion, Juan Diego remained a humble and reserved man. He worked the land and lived in a small hut far from the bustle of the city. His Christian devotion was profound, and he often walked long distances to attend Mass in Tlatelolco, displaying a faith that even impressed the missionaries who had evangelized him. However, Juan Diego did not seek recognition or privileges. His faith was sincere, and his heart was filled with love for God and his people. Although he was an ordinary man, he possessed an inner strength that would prepare him for the extraordinary mission heaven had reserved for him. In his simplicity, Juan Diego embodied the qualities that made him the perfect messenger for Our Lady of Guadalupe: humility, faith, and a deep love for his people. Unbeknownst to him, his ordinary life was about to become extraordinary, an ordinary man with an extraordinary destiny. Juan Diego never imagined that his daily walk would lead him to a heavenly encounter. Like many other indigenous people of his time, he was a man of simple life. His days held no luxuries or great ambitions. His sole purpose was to work the land, care for his family, and since his conversion, serve God with humility. Yet history often chooses the smallest for the greatest missions. It was a cold December dawn when Juan Diego set out on his path to Tlatelolco to attend Mass. He walked barefoot with his maguey fiber tilma covering his body to shield him from the wind. Although the cold pierced his bones, his heart was filled with peace. That day seemed like any other, but destiny had written something different for him. Upon reaching the hill of Tepeyac, Juan Diego felt something strange, a profound silence that seemed to envelop everything around him. Suddenly, He heard a sweet and harmonious song, as if coming from hundreds of birds. Surprised, he stopped, trying to understand where this celestial music was coming from. Then he saw her, a radiant woman, dressed in a blue mantle decorated with stars, who introduced herself as the Mother of God. The Virgin spoke to him with a voice full of tenderness and love, calling him by his Nahuatl name, Juanito, Juan Dieguito, the smallest of my children. He fell to his knees, astonished by the beauty and light emanating from her presence. The Virgin asked him to go to the Bishop of Mexico to convey a message. She wanted a temple built in that place, where she could demonstrate her love and comfort to all her people. That day, Juan Diego's life changed forever. Despite being a humble man without influence or power, he accepted the mission with courage and faith, convinced he was fulfilling a divine purpose. That encounter marked the beginning of a story the world would never forget. The miraculous encounter on the hill of Tepeyac. On December 9th, 1531, the day dawned like any other. But for Juan Diego, it would mark the beginning of a spiritual journey that would transcend the centuries. As he passed by the hill of Tepeyac, his steps came to an abrupt halt when a blinding light illuminated his path. Amidst that light appeared a figure who would change the course of Mexico's history forever. The woman who presented herself to him was unlike any other. Her brown skin and indigenous features reflected a profound understanding of her people's hearts. She wore a blue mantle filled with stars, and under her feet rested the crescent moon. With a sweet voice, she spoke to him in Nahuatl, the language of his people, and called him my smallest son. This gesture of tenderness filled Juan Diego with a peace he had never experienced. The Virgin explained her mission. He was to go before Bishop Fray Juan de Zumárraga and ask him to build a temple on the hill of Tepeyac, where she could hear the prayers of her people and offer comfort. Deeply moved and full of faith, Juan Diego promised to fulfill her request. Although he did not understand why he had been chosen, he trusted entirely in the words of the Mother of Heaven. That night, Juan Diego returned home under the stars, reflecting on what he had witnessed. How could he convince the bishop of something so extraordinary? He was just a farmer, and religious authorities would hardly listen to someone like him. However, his faith drove him to press on. The encounter at Tepeyac not only transformed Juan Diego, but also planted the seed of a faith that would unite an entire people. From that moment, the hill ceased to be just a location. It became a point of connection between heaven and earth, where the divine manifested itself tangibly. The celestial message, "Build a temple here." When Juan Diego arrived at the residence of Bishop Fray Juan de Zumárraga, his heart was pounding. It was not easy for an indigenous man of his time to present himself before an ecclesiastical authority, but the Virgin's words resonated in his mind. He knew he had to deliver the message, even as doubts began to creep in. The bishop, a cultured and prudent man, listened to him attentively, but with skepticism. The idea that the Virgin Mary had chosen a humble indigenous man to carry such an important message seemed unlikely. Though he did not dismiss Juan Diego outright, he requested time to reflect, and most importantly, proof to confirm the authenticity of his claim. Disheartened but not defeated, Juan Diego returned to the hill of Tepeyac and recounted what had happened to the Virgin. With words full of gentleness, she consoled him and asked him to return the next day to insist on her request. She assured him that she herself would provide the sign the bishop needed to believe in her message. This assurance filled Juan Diego's heart with hope. The next day, Juan Diego returned to the bishop, but the response was the same. He required concrete evidence to make a decision. Juan Diego felt small and insignificant in the face of the task entrusted to him, but his faith kept him steadfast. The Virgin had not chosen him by chance. There was a greater purpose behind it all. The celestial message, "Build a temple here," was not just a request, but a symbol of hope for a people seeking unity under a common faith. The Virgin of Guadalupe spoke not only through Juan Diego, but to the hearts of all who sought comfort, peace, and a sense of belonging. The initial rejection by the bishop and the divine proof. When Juan Diego once again appeared before Bishop Zumárraga, he did so with a mix of hope and fear. He had spent days meditating on how to convey the Virgin's message, but his words still had not moved the bishop. In this second audience, the bishop listened attentively, but insisted on more substantial proof to believe what Juan Diego was saying. Disheartened, the farmer returned to the hill of Tepeyac to tell the Virgin what had happened. With tender words, she consoled him and assured him that she would provide an undeniable sign. She asked him to return the next day to receive the evidence that would convince the bishop of the authenticity of her message. Although doubts persisted, Juan Diego's faith remained strong. However, events did not unfold as he expected. Upon arriving home, he discovered that his uncle, Juan Bernardino, was gravely ill. Concerned, he decided to prioritize his family, and the next day took an alternate route to seek medical help, avoiding his meeting with the Virgin at Tepeyac. To his surprise, she appeared to him on this alternate path. With gentleness, she reminded him not to be afraid, promising to take care of his uncle's health. These words not only calmed his heart, but also reaffirmed his mission. This encounter marked a turning point in his faith, filling him with confidence to carry out what had been asked of him. With newfound inner strength, Juan Diego prepared himself to face the bishop's doubts once more. Though he still did not know what sign the Virgin would give him, he was convinced that a miracle was near and that his mission would not be in vain. The miracle of the roses in winter. On December 12, 1531, Juan Diego returned to the hill of Tepeyac, full of uncertainty but holding fast to the Virgin's promise. That day, the cold air bit at his face, and the ground was frozen, covered in the frost of winter. Yet upon reaching the spot indicated by the Virgin, something extraordinary occurred. A field of fresh, fragrant roses bloomed in the middle of winter. The Virgin instructed him to gather the roses in his tilma, the humble cloak he used to shield himself from the cold. Carefully, Juan Diego picked the flowers and placed them in his tilma as she had requested. The flowers, with their unusual beauty, emanated a heavenly fragrance that filled his heart with hope and faith. With his heart brimming with emotion, Juan Diego set off for the bishop's residence, carrying the roses as the divine sign promised by the Virgin. As he walked, he repeated her words in his mind, confident that this proof would be enough to convince the bishop to build the temple she had asked for. Along the way, the roses seemed to radiate a special warmth, as if imbued with the Virgin's celestial presence. When Juan Diego finally stood before Bishop Zumárraga, he unfurled his tilma to reveal the roses. But what happened next left everyone present in awe. On the fabric of the tilma, in addition to the flowers, appeared the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe, perfectly formed with a level of detail and beauty that defied explanation. This miraculous image would transcend the centuries as a symbol of faith and hope. The miracle of the roses not only marked the culmination of Juan Diego's mission, but also sealed the faith of an entire nation. From that moment on, the bishop had no doubts. The temple must be built on the hill of Tepeyac, just as the Virgin had requested. The winter roses became a tangible reminder that faith can bloom even in the harshest conditions. The apparition of the Virgin on the tilma. The unveiling of Juan Diego's tilma before Bishop Zumárraga was a moment that left everyone speechless. On the coarse fabric of the humble garment, made from maguey fibers, the image of the Virgin Mary was imprinted. Her serene and maternal face radiated a light that seemed to come from heaven itself. No one in the room could contain their amazement at this prodigy. The Virgin of Guadalupe appeared on the tilma with features that made her unique. Her brown skin and indigenous facial features sent a clear message to the Mexican people. She was not a distant figure, but a mother who understood and embraced their culture and their pain. Her blue mantle, adorned with stars, symbolized the heavens, while the crescent moon beneath her feet represented her victory over the ancient deities. Every detail seemed to carry profound meaning. The bishop, who had previously doubted Juan Diego's words, fell to his knees upon seeing the image. He immediately recognized that he was witnessing a miracle, a divine manifestation that could not be explained by human means. This event marked a turning point, not only in Juan Diego's life, but also in the history of faith in Mexico. News of the miracle quickly spread throughout the region. Crowds began to flock to the hill of Tepeyac to see the place where the Virgin had appeared. For the indigenous people, the Virgin of Guadalupe became a symbol of hope and reconciliation, a bridge between their cultural roots and the new Christian faith brought by the conquerors. From that day on, Juan Diego's tilma was venerated as a sacred relic. Its preservation, inexplicable from a scientific standpoint, has been the subject of study and admiration for centuries. Beyond its material composition, the image on the tilma remains a reminder of the maternal love of the Virgin and her call for unity and faith, the faith that transformed a nation. The miracle at the hill of Tepeyac did not just change the life of Juan Diego, it also marked the beginning of a profound transformation in the faith of the Mexican people. Until that moment, many indigenous individuals viewed Christianity as an imposed foreign religion. However, the Virgin of Guadalupe, with her image and message, spoke directly to the hearts of a wounded people, offering them a sense of belonging and hope. The construction of the temple at Tepeyac became a symbolic act of reconciliation between two worlds. The indigenous people began to see in the Virgin a figure who understood them, who did not judge their roots but embraced them with love. This shift in perception led to a massive conversion to Christianity, not through coercion, but through sincere faith. The image of the Virgin on the tilma became the banner of this new era. Her maternal face seemed to convey a universal message of peace and comfort, while her appearance on the humble cloak of an ordinary indigenous man sent a powerful message of equality and dignity. For the indigenous people, she was not merely a celestial figure, but a mother who walked with them in their sufferings and joys. Over time, the sanctuary of the Virgin of Guadalupe at Tepeyac became a place of pilgrimage, attracting people from all over Mexico and beyond. Every year, millions of faithful travel to the site to pay homage, seek miracles, and give thanks for blessings received. The devotion to the Virgin united the Mexican people in a common faith, overcoming cultural and social differences. The faith in the Virgin of Guadalupe did not just transform Mexico, it also left an indelible mark on the history of Catholicism in the Americas. Her message of love and compassion remains relevant today, reminding everyone that in the midst of adversity, there is always hope. The construction of the most visited sanctuary in the world. After the miracle on December 12, 1531, Bishop Zumarraga understood that the Virgin's will must be fulfilled. Without delay, the construction of a temple began on the hill of Tepeyac, as she had requested. This first sanctuary, though humble, marked the beginning of what would become the spiritual heart of Mexico. The faithful immediately began flocking to the hill to venerate the image of the Virgin imprinted on Juan Diego's tilma. People from all regions, both indigenous and mestizo, made pilgrimages to the site, bringing offerings, flowers, and prayers. That small temple was not just a place of worship, but also a symbol of unity for a nation divided by conquest. Over time, the sanctuary was expanded to accommodate the growing number of pilgrims. In the following centuries, new structures were built to honor the significance of the site. The Basilica of Guadalupe, as we know it today, was inaugurated in 1976, becoming one of the most important pilgrimage centers in the world. Throughout the years, the sanctuary has been not only a place of devotion, but also a haven of solace for millions. From those seeking miracles to those simply wishing to give thanks for blessings received, Tepeyac has remained a point of connection between the divine and the human. Today, the Basilica of Guadalupe welcomes over 20 million visitors annually, particularly during the festivities on December 12th. Its importance transcends Mexico's borders, and its message remains the same. The Virgin of Guadalupe is a loving mother who welcomes everyone under her mantle. The life of humility and service of Juan Diego. After the miracle and the construction of the temple at Tepeyac, Juan Diego's life changed forever. Although he became a revered figure to many, he continued to live with the same humility that had always characterized him. His mission did not end with the miracle, rather, it took on a new purpose. Juan Diego dedicated the rest of his life to serving the temple and the pilgrims who came to the site. His primary task was to care for the image of the Virgin and to share his story with those who sought to understand the miracle. With patience and devotion, he recounted his experiences, conveying the message of love and hope from the Virgin of Guadalupe. Despite his proximity to the divine, Juan Diego never sought honors or privileges. He continued living in a small hut near the sanctuary, leading a simple and austere life. For him, true greatness lay in serving God and his people without expecting anything in return. His unwavering faith made him an example to all who met him, Juan Diego's humility did not go unnoticed. The Franciscan missionaries who worked in evangelization recognized in him a special spirit, a man who fully embodied Christian values. Through his example, he helped many indigenous people reconcile with the new faith, showing them that Christianity was not opposed to their identity, but could be a source of hope. When Juan Diego passed away in 1548, his legacy was already deeply rooted in the hearts of the Mexican people. His life was a testament to how faith, humility, and service can transform not just a person, but an entire nation. The tilma of the Virgin and its inexplicable mysteries. From the day the image of the Virgin appeared on Juan Diego's tilma, the cloak became an object of profound veneration and countless studies. Scientists, historians, and theologians have tried to decipher the mysteries surrounding this unique relic, but many of its secrets continue to defy logic and science. One of the most intriguing aspects of the tilma is its state of preservation. The cloak, made from maguey fibers, should have deteriorated in less than 30 years, yet it has remained intact for nearly 5 centuries. Despite being exposed to light, humidity, and the passage of time, the fabric remains as strong as the day it was woven. Another mystery lies in the image itself. Studies have shown that there are no brush strokes or traces of paint on the tilma, meaning the figure was not created by human hands. Furthermore, the eyes of the Virgin contain microscopic details that can only be seen with modern technology, including what appears to be the figure of Juan Diego and other individuals present at the moment of the miracle. The tilma also defies the laws of physics. The temperature of the fabric remains constant at 36 degrees Celsius, similar to that of a human body. Additionally, the colors of the image seem to change depending on the distance from which it is viewed, an effect that cannot be replicated by known artistic techniques. These mysteries have only strengthened the faith of those who venerate the Virgin of Guadalupe. Beyond scientific or supernatural explanations, the tilma remains a symbol of hope, a tangible reminder of the divine presence among humanity. The canonization of Saint Juan Diego, a historic moment. On May 2, 2000, the Catholic Church took a historic step by declaring Juan Diego blessed. This official recognition honored his life of faith, humility, and service, as well as the profound spiritual impact he had on Mexico and the world. However, the moment most awaited by the faithful came 2 years later when he was canonized by Pope John Paul II on July 31, 2002. The canonization ceremony, held at the Basilica of Guadalupe, was an event of historic proportions. More than 12 million people gathered to witness this solemn act, making it one of the largest gatherings of faithful in the history of the Church. Juan Diego became the first indigenous person from the Americas to be declared a saint, a fact that resonated deeply within indigenous communities and Catholics worldwide. In his homily, Pope John Paul II emphasized Juan Diego's humility and courage, pointing to his life as a model for all believers. He also highlighted the fundamental role of the Virgin of Guadalupe in the evangelization of the Americas, reminding everyone that her message of love and unity remains relevant in today's world. The canonization of Juan Diego was not only an act of faith, but also a symbol of historical justice. Recognizing the sanctity of an indigenous man was an important step toward reconciliation between cultures and a reminder that sainthood is not reserved for the privileged, but is accessible to anyone who dedicates their life to God and to serving others. Today, Saint Juan Diego is remembered as a messenger of hope and a bridge between cultures. His life and legacy serve as a testament that, even in the midst of adversity, one can find a divine purpose that transcends time and space. Devotion to Saint Juan Diego in the modern world. Although Saint Juan Diego lived nearly 5 centuries ago, his story continues to inspire millions of people today. In Mexico and many parts of the world, he is venerated as an example of faith, humility, and obedience. His devotion is not only tied to his connection with the Virgin of Guadalupe, but also to his role as a model of service and love for others. In indigenous communities, Saint Juan Diego is seen as a symbol of identity and pride. His canonization reaffirmed that sanctity is accessible to everyone, regardless of origin or social status. For this reason, His devotion has grown not only in Mexico, but also in other Latin American countries and among Hispanic communities in the United States. Each December 12th, during the celebrations in honor of the Virgin of Guadalupe, the faithful also remember Saint Juan Diego. Many pilgrims visit the Basilica of Guadalupe, bringing flowers, candles, and prayers in his honor. Masses and processions dedicated to him reflect the spiritual impact he continues to have on the lives of believers. Additionally, the figure of Saint Juan Diego has transcended religious boundaries. In a world marked by inequality and exclusion, his story reminds us of the importance of humility, service, and faith as tools to overcome adversity. His example inspires people of all ages to seek justice, reconciliation, and unity. In today's world, Saint Juan Diego is more than a saint. He is a beacon of hope. His legacy demonstrates that faith can transform lives and that through simple yet loving actions, one can leave an indelible mark on history. The eternal impact of Saint Juan Diego and the Virgin of Guadalupe. The story of Saint Juan Diego is not just about a humble man who witnessed a miracle. It is also about a spiritual transformation that changed the course of an entire nation. His encounter with the Virgin of Guadalupe marked the beginning of a movement of faith that has endured for centuries, transcending borders and becoming a symbol of hope, love, and unity. The impact of Saint Juan Diego and the Virgin of Guadalupe is visible in every corner of Mexico. From the streets filled with pilgrims marching to Tepeyac to the household altars adorned with flowers and candles, their legacy lives on in everyday expressions of faith. There is hardly a Mexican home unfamiliar with the story of the farmer, who through his humility changed the destiny of his people. But this legacy is not confined to Mexico. Across Latin America, the United States, and beyond, the Virgin of Guadalupe and Saint Juan Diego are universal symbols of resilience and hope, especially for the marginalized and disadvantaged. People find in them a mother who listens to their prayers and a role model of virtue that inspires them. Moreover, the message of the Virgin of Guadalupe remains as relevant today as it was nearly 5 centuries ago. Her apparition was not only a religious miracle, but also an act of cultural and social reconciliation. In a world increasingly divided, Saint Juan Diego's story reminds us that faith can build bridges, overcome differences, and unite hearts around a common purpose. Today, as millions kneel before the image of the Virgin on the tilma, they honor not only the miracle of that December 12th, but also the legacy of a man whose life teaches us that even the simplest acts, guided by faith, can have an eternal impact. His example invites us to live with humility, serve with love, and trust fully in God's divine plan. A final prayer to Saint Juan Diego: humility, faith, and hope. Beloved Saint Juan Diego, humble man of simple heart, chosen by the Mother of Heaven to be her messenger on earth, today we kneel before your memory and example, asking you to intercede for us before God and Our Lady of Guadalupe. Teach us to be like you, faithful, courageous, and obedient to the call of heaven, even when the task seems beyond our strength. You who carried the weight of a divine mission amid your own trials, guide us in our difficulties. Help us to trust that, as the Virgin told you, "Am I not here, I who am your mother?" In our doubts, fears, and tribulations, may we remember that we are never alone, and that under Mary's mantle we find comfort and refuge. Intercede for the poor, the forgotten, and those who seek hope. You, who were a man of the people without riches or power, show us that true greatness lies in serving others with love and humility. May we find in our simplicity the strength to transform our surroundings through acts of faith and kindness. Pray for our families, Saint Juan Diego. May peace and love reign in our homes, and may we recognize God's presence in the small things of daily life. Just as the Virgin chose you, an ordinary man, help us to see that each of us has a special purpose in God's plans. Finally, we ask you to guide us toward a life closer to God. Help us to hear His voice in our hearts and respond with courage, without fear of difficulties. May our faith bloom like roses in winter, and may our lives reflect the eternal message of the Virgin of Guadalupe: love, unity, and hope for all. Saint Juan Diego, messenger of the Virgin and model of humility, pray for us today and always. Amen.